How did one dinner table insult turn into a notice that changed everything in 10 minutes? My son mocked my wife while his new wife clapped like she was at a show, and the whole table watched to see if I would act like a man. I didn't argue. I stepped outside, made one quiet call, and came back in time to see his phone light up, and his confidence fold in half. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, hit the hype button, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? Some mornings start with the smell of coffee and the sound of routine. Others start with a reminder that your own family has learned to treat you like furniture. I woke up that Tuesday knowing we had dinner plans, and I already felt the familiar weight in my chest. Kara was standing at the kitchen counter, pouring water into the coffee maker with slow, careful movements, like she was trying not to make noise that might wake up trouble. "You sure you want to go tonight?" I asked. She looked at me, then back at the counter. "It's his birthday dinner, Cedric. If we don't show up, it'll be worse." I nodded. That was how it worked now. We showed up, stayed quiet, and let Reed test the boundaries of what we would tolerate. He had been doing it for months, ever since he married Brenna. She was 23, confident in a way that felt manufactured, and she had learned fast that our family had a soft center. She poked at it like it was sport. Reed used to be different. When he was younger, I taught him how to change a tire, how to balance a checkbook, how to walk into a room and make people feel comfortable instead of small. Somewhere along the way, he traded those lessons for louder ones. He learned that if you speak with enough certainty, people assume you're right. If you smile while you insult someone, they'll call it a joke, and if your father doesn't push back, it means he can't. I sipped my coffee and watched Kara move around the kitchen. She was 42, still beautiful in the way that comes from years of kindness and patience. But lately, her shoulders stayed tight, and she didn't laugh as much. Reed had started making comments about her age, her clothes, the way she kept house. Brenna would echo him, add her own spin, and the whole room would go quiet, waiting to see if I would do something. I never did, not in the way they expected. "We'll go," I said. "We'll have dinner, we'll be polite, and we'll come home." Kara gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She knew what tonight would cost us. By 6 o'clock, we were dressed and driving toward the restaurant. It was one of those places with cloth napkins and waiters who refill your water before you notice it's empty. Reed had picked it, of course. He liked being seen in places like this, liked the way people looked at him when he walked in wearing a jacket and an expensive watch. Brenna loved it even more. She treated every public outing like a performance, and tonight she had a full audience. We arrived a few minutes early. The hostess led us to a private dining area in the back, a long table set for 8. Reed's friends were already there, laughing too loud, their phones face up on the table like they were expecting important calls. Brenna sat at Reed's right, her hand resting on his arm like she was claiming territory. "Hey, Dad," Reed said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, performative. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Kara hugged him, and he patted her shoulder the way you'd pat a dog. Brenna smiled at us, bright and sharp, and gestured to the seats across from them. "We saved you the good spot," she said, "right where you can see everything." I sat down, and Kara took the seat beside me. The table filled up quickly. Reed's co-worker, a guy named Trevor who talked too much about his car. Brenna's sister, whose name I could never remember, who spent most of her time filming everything on her phone. And 2 other friends who seemed to exist only to laugh at Reed's jokes. The waiter came by, took drink orders, and disappeared. Reed leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident, and started telling a story about a deal he had closed at work. He made it sound bigger than it was, added details that didn't quite line up, and everyone nodded along like he was delivering a keynote speech. Then he looked at Kara. "Mom, you should have seen the client. he said. She reminded me of you, actually. Same vibe. The table went quiet. Brenna smiled, her eyes bright. What vibe is that? Kara asked softly. Reed shrugged. You know, old school, a little out of touch, but sweet. Someone laughed. I don't know who. It didn't matter. Brenna leaned forward, her voice pitched just loud enough for everyone to hear. It's actually kind of charming, though, like vintage. You know your place, and you just stay there. She clapped her hands together twice, slow and deliberate, like she was applauding a dog that had learned a trick. The whole table watched me. I could feel it. They wanted to see if I would raise my voice, if I would make a scene, if I would prove I was still capable of standing up for my wife. I looked at Reed, then at Brenna, then at Kara. Her face was calm, but her hands were folded tight in her lap. I didn't argue. I didn't lecture. I didn't ask them to apologize. I stood up, pulled my phone from my pocket and said, "Excuse me, I need to take this." I walked out of the dining area, through the main restaurant, and onto the patio. The air was cool, and the street noise was distant. I stood under one of the heat lamps and made a call. It rang twice. "Dorian," I said. "It's Cedric. I need you to move forward with what we discussed." There was a pause on the other end. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." "I'll send it now. You'll see confirmation in about 5 minutes." "Thank you." I hung up, slipped my phone back into my pocket, and walked back inside. I took my seat at the table like nothing had changed. Kara glanced at me, questions in her eyes, but I gave her a small nod. She relaxed, just a little. Reed was mid-sentence, talking about his next promotion, when his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, frowned, and picked it up. His face changed. The confidence drained out of it, replaced by something tighter, something confused. He tapped the screen, scrolled, then looked up at me. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. I just held his gaze until he looked away. People think respect is something you earn once and keep forever. That's not how it works. Respect is a daily negotiation, a balance between what you give and what you're willing to tolerate. I had been giving for years. Reed had been taking. And somewhere along the way, he forgot that tolerance has limits. It didn't start with Brenna. It started earlier, back when Reed was still in college. I had paid for his tuition, his rent, his car insurance, and every emergency that came up in between. He called me at 2 a.m. when he got a flat tire. He texted me when his bank account went negative. I fixed things quietly, without lecture, because that's what fathers do. But quiet help doesn't make noise, and noise is what people remember. Reed started to think I was soft because I didn't make him beg. He started to think Kara was weak because she didn't demand gratitude. And when Brenna came into the picture, she saw the dynamic and decided to test it. The first time I noticed the shift was at a Sunday dinner, about 6 months after they got married. Kara had made her usual spread: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and a pie that took her half the afternoon. Reed showed up late, Brenna in tow, and neither of them apologized. They sat down, loaded their plates, and Brenna made a comment about how home-cooked food is so nostalgic. Kara smiled, trying to take it as a compliment. Brenna kept going. "I mean, it's nice, but we usually eat out. More convenient, you know? Less effort." Reed laughed. "Yeah, Mom's stuff is great, but it's not exactly modern." Kara's smile tightened, but she didn't respond. I watched her hands go still on her lap, the way they always did when she was hurt, but trying not to show it. I should have said something then. I should have told Reed that disrespect wrapped in humor is still disrespect. But I didn't. I told myself it was just a phase, that he'd grow out of it, that calling him out would only make things worse. I was wrong. Over the next few months, the comments got sharper. Reed started making jokes about Kara's age, her routines, the way she dressed. Brenna would nod along, add her own observations, and the rest of the family would either laugh nervously or pretend not to hear. My mother, Nola, pulled me aside once and told me to handle it before it gets worse. I told her I was working on it. She looked at me like she didn't believe me. At work, I kept my head down. I'm a business analyst, which means I spend most of my day looking at numbers, patterns, and systems. I find inefficiencies and fix them. I don't do it loudly. I don't send company-wide emails or demand credit. I just make things work better, and people notice eventually. My coworker Gavin once told me I was the kind of guy who gets underestimated until it's too late. I took it as a compliment. Reed worked in sales, which meant he was loud by profession. He talked fast, smiled big, and made promises he sometimes couldn't keep. But people liked him, or at least they liked the version of him he performed in public. At home, he was different. He was testing, always testing, to see how far he could push before someone pushed back. The family group chat became a battleground. Someone would post a picture, and Reed would make a comment about Kara's appearance or her expression. Brenna would follow up with a laughing emoji. Other relatives would react, but not defend. It was like watching a slow erosion, where every joke took a little more ground, and nobody seemed to notice how much was already gone. One night, Kara sat on the edge of our bed and said, "I don't think he respects me anymore." I looked up from my phone. "What do you mean?" "Reed. He used to listen when I talked. Now he just waits for me to stop so he can say something clever." I didn't argue with her. I couldn't. She was right. "He's going through something," I said. "Marriage changes people. It shouldn't change them into this." I put my phone down and sat beside her. "I'll talk to him." "Don't." Her voice was quiet but firm. "It'll just make it worse. He'll say I'm being sensitive, and you'll end up defending me, and then he'll make it about how we don't support his happiness." She was right about that too. So I didn't talk to him. I watched. I listened. I started keeping track of patterns, the way I do at work, dates, phrases, who was present, who laughed, who stayed silent. I didn't write it down yet, but I started building a timeline in my head. And then came the restaurant. That first dinner, the one where Brenna clapped and Reed smirked, and everyone waited to see if I would act like a man, that was the turning point. Not because of what they said. I had heard worse. But because of what I felt. Or rather, what I didn't feel. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I felt clear. Anger makes you reactive. Clarity makes you precise. And precision is what I needed. There's a particular relief that comes from finally making a decision you've been avoiding. It isn't happiness. It's more like setting down something heavy you've been carrying too long. That's how I felt the morning after the restaurant. I woke before my alarm, made coffee, and realized I wasn't dreading the next family gathering anymore. I wasn't bracing for the next insult. I was simply waiting. Kara was still asleep, her breathing slow and steady. I slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen. The house was quiet in that early morning way that feels full of possibility. I stood by the window, watching the first light touch the rooftops as the neighborhood woke up one house at a time. For the first time in months, it felt like I was waking up too. I took a notebook from the drawer and sat at the table, writing down dates, conversations, promises, money I had lent or guaranteed, systems I had supported without expecting credit. The lease I co-signed when Reed couldn't qualify on his own. The car loan I guaranteed so he could keep his job. The emergency fund he'd used twice without ever mentioning repayment. Every favor, every safety net, every bit of leverage I'd provided without imagining he'd forget it or take it for granted. I wasn't angry as I wrote. I was methodical, the same way I approach problems at work. This wasn't about payback. It was about enforcement. Reed had broken an agreement he didn't even know existed, and I was going to show him what happens when respect becomes one-sided. Kara came in a few minutes later, robe wrapped around her, coffee in hand. She glanced at the notebook. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Slept fine," I said. "Just woke up early." She didn't press, though I could see the questions. That quiet trust, her willingness to wait until I was ready, only strengthened my resolve. At work that day, everything clicked. Numbers, patterns, data points all lined up cleanly. As a business analyst, my job is to spot problems people have learned to tolerate and prove they're fixable. That's exactly what I was doing now. The problem just wasn't a process or a budget. It was my son's belief that disrespect came without consequences. Gavin stopped by my desk mid-morning. He had a coffee in one hand and a folder in the other, and he dropped into the chair across from me with the easy confidence of someone who had known me long enough to skip small talk and polite distance. "You good?" he asked, studying my face. "Yeah. Why?" "You seem different, focused, but in a new way." I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. "Same as always." He tilted his head, his analyst brain working on me the same way I worked on spreadsheets. "No, it's not the same. You're usually focused like you're solving a problem in real time, adjusting as you go. Now you're focused like you already solved it and you're just waiting for everyone else to catch up." I smiled slightly. Maybe I did. He didn't push further, but I could tell he wanted to. Gavin was good at reading people, at noticing the small shifts in behavior that others missed. It made him a solid coworker and a decent friend, but it also meant he noticed things I wasn't ready to explain yet. I didn't mind. If anything, it was useful to have someone in my corner who understood that silence didn't always mean weakness or uncertainty. Sometimes it just meant preparation. That evening, I drove past Reed's apartment complex on my way home. It wasn't significantly out of the way, just a few extra turns through a neighborhood I used to know well from helping him move in 3 years ago. His car was in the lot, parked in his usual spot near the building entrance. The lights were on in his unit on the second floor, the curtains half drawn the way they always were. Everything looked normal from the outside, stable and secure. But I knew it wasn't. Because 10 minutes after I made that call from the restaurant patio, Dorian had sent the formal notice. Legal, procedural, irreversible. Reed just didn't know the full weight of it yet. He had seen a message on his phone, felt a flicker of concern, but he hadn't yet understood that the ground beneath him had shifted in ways he couldn't undo with charm or excuses. When I got home, Kara was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. The rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board was soothing, domestic, a counterpoint to the calculated moves I had been making all day. She looked up when I walked in, her expression soft but cautious, like she was still trying to figure out what version of me had come home. "Reed called," she said, setting the knife down carefully. I set my keys on the counter, my movements deliberate. "What did he say?" "He wanted to know if you were upset about something. He sounded worried." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, that you seemed fine to me." I nodded slowly. "Good. That's exactly right." She turned to face me fully, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Cedric, what's going on?" "Really?" "I'm handling it the right way. That's all you need to know for now." "That's not an answer." I crossed the room and stood beside her, close enough that I could speak quietly, intimately. "I'm making sure he understands that respect isn't optional, and I'm doing it through systems, through structures he agreed to, but never thought he'd have to honor. I'm not yelling. I'm not threatening. I'm just enforcing what was always there." She searched my face, looking for cracks, looking for doubt or anger or anything that might suggest I was acting out of emotion rather than principle. She didn't find any of those things because they weren't there. This wasn't about my feelings being hurt or my pride being damaged. This was about protecting her dignity and teaching our son that words have consequences. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady. "I trust you." Those 3 words meant more to me than any elaborate expression of support could have. She trusted me. Even when she didn't know the full plan, even when the path forward was unclear, She trusted that I was moving carefully and with purpose. That night, I sat in my home office with the door closed, the small desk lamp casting a warm circle of light across the surface. I pulled out a plain folder from the bottom drawer of my desk, one I had prepared weeks ago but hadn't needed to reference until now. Inside were notes, careful observations, not formal documents or evidence that would hold up in court, just reminders to myself about patterns and timelines. I added a few more details from recent days, then labeled the folder with a single word written in black marker: timeline. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to be. It was just a record of how we had arrived at this moment, a map of the small erosions that had led to the restaurant incident. I set a calendar reminder on my phone for 2 weeks out. The next family dinner, same restaurant, same private dining area, same hostess who would lead us to the back table. Reed had suggested it himself in the group chat just this morning, framing it as a chance to smooth things over and get back to normal. Brenna had added a comment about letting bygones be bygones, as if the problem had been mutual, as if Kara and I had done something wrong that needed forgiving. I didn't respond to the chat. I just marked the date, set the reminder, and continued preparing. Over the next few days, I made a series of quiet, ordinary moves. I confirmed details with Dorian over brief phone calls that sounded like casual check-ins. He assured me everything was in order, the notice sent properly, the timeline fixed. I also requested account statements from my bank, not out of urgency, but to create a clear paper trail showing exactly how and when I had supported Reed financially. I scheduled a meeting with my financial advisor to review retirement accounts and investments, while also asking pointed questions about co-signed agreements and guarantor rights. Everything was procedural, routine, and completely above board, nothing that would attract attention or raise suspicion. Reed, meanwhile, relaxed. He posted smiling photos with Brenna at trendy restaurants and weekend outings, captions full of living our best life and unbothered and thriving. In the family group chat, he joked, shared memes, and acted like nothing had happened, confident, untouchable, exactly as everyone expected him to be. I let him believe that. I let him think the restaurant moment had been a minor disruption, already forgotten, and that we were drifting back towards some version of normal. One afternoon, I stopped by the restaurant to confirm the reservation for the upcoming dinner. Marisol Wren, the manager, recognized me immediately. "Same table, same setup," she said. "Anything special you need?" "No," I replied. "The usual is fine." She smiled, but I could tell she remembered the last dinner. Good managers always do. Before I left, she added quietly that if I needed anything that evening, I should let her know. I sat in my car afterward, engine off, running through the plan again. It was simple, clean, and irreversible. It required no raised voices, no threats, only systems Reed had already agreed to, obligations he had signed without much thought. I was simply activating consequences that had always existed, waiting in the background. That evening, Kara asked if I was nervous about the dinner. "No," I said. "Not even a little?" "I'm ready," I replied. "That's different." The next morning, Dorian texted, "Confirmed. Everything is active. System is locked. Let me know when you need me there." "Soon," I answered. The timeline was complete. The next dinner was set. All that remained was to wait for Reed to walk into the moment he had been building toward for months, a reckoning shaped by countless small choices he'd assumed were harmless, and he would walk into it. People like Reed always do. They mistake patience for weakness, silence for surrender, and calm for defeat. But calm isn't defeat. Calm is preparation with the volume turned down, strategy in plain clothes, waiting for the right moment to remind someone that consequences are real, even when they arrive quietly. The days leading up to the second dinner stretched out with a peculiar quality, like waiting for a storm you can see building on the horizon. Not anxious waiting, but purposeful. I kept my routines steady, Work, spreadsheets, meetings about quarterly projections, small talk with Gavin, everything normal on the surface. Inside, I was counting down. Kara noticed I was spending more time in my office after dinner. One night she knocked softly and brought me tea, steam rising from the cup. "You don't have to do this alone," she said, setting it on my desk. "I'm not alone. I have you." She smiled, weighted with concern. "I mean, whatever you're planning, you don't have to protect me by keeping me in the dark." I gestured to the chair. "Sit. I'll show you." I opened the folder and showed her everything: the timeline of insults, the financial records, the co-signed lease from 3 years ago, the guaranteed car loan, the emergency transfers when his account went negative. "This isn't about the money," I said. "It's about the agreement that came with it. He broke that agreement repeatedly, and now I'm enforcing consequences." Kara read through everything slowly, her finger tracing the timeline. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with relief. "You've been planning this for weeks." "Longer, but I didn't want to move until I was certain." "And you're certain now?" "Completely." She reached across and took my hand. "Then I'm with you, whatever happens." The next morning I had a meeting at the bank, routine administrative maintenance. Teresa, the banker, walked me through the changes efficiently. "So just to confirm," she said, "you're updating the terms on the co-signed lease agreement, modifying your status from active guarantor to conditional with notice provisions?" "Correct, and I want written confirmation sent to all parties, mail and electronic." "No problem. That'll go out by end of business today. 30 days from receipt." "Perfect." I left feeling lighter. Stopped at a coffee shop where Gavin was waiting at our usual table. "You're early," I said. "So are you." He pushed a cup toward me. "You want to tell me what's going on?" "I'm finishing something I should have finished a long time ago." He studied me carefully. "Just make sure it's clean. Make sure you can look yourself in the mirror after." "It is, I promise." "Good. Because whatever this is, it's working. You look lighter." That afternoon, Dorian called. "Everything's locked in," he said. "The notice went out yesterday, certified mail and email. If Reed tries to contest, he'll have to go through proper channels, and those take time he doesn't have." "What about the timing?" "Perfect. The moment you called me from that restaurant, the clock started. By the time you have your next dinner, he'll be fully aware of what's at stake." Quiet satisfaction settled in. "Thank you, Dorian." "The hard part is still coming. When he realizes what's happening, there'll be pushback. You ready?" "I've been ready for weeks." That evening, the family group chat lit up. Reed posted, "Looking forward to Saturday. Same time, same place." Several people reacted with emojis. Brenna added, "Can't wait." I didn't respond, just noted the message and set my phone aside. "You're not going to say anything?" Kara asked. "No need. They'll know I'm coming when I show up." The next few days passed with deliberate slowness. I maintained everything normal while underneath the countdown continued. 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. Friday evening, I sat in my office reviewing everything one final time. The timeline complete. Systems active. Notices sent and received. Every legal requirement met. Every procedural step followed precisely. I closed the folder and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning. Tomorrow would show whether Reed was capable of understanding, of growth. Either way, I was ready. The morning of the second dinner arrived with unusual clarity. Clear autumn sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows, no clouds, no ambiguity. I woke before my alarm, the habit of the past few weeks having trained my body to anticipate these important moments. Kara was still asleep beside me, her breathing deep and even. Her face relaxed in a way it hadn't been for months. Even in sleep, she looked lighter somehow, as if her unconscious mind had registered the shift coming. I slipped out of bed carefully and made my way to the kitchen. The house was silent except for familiar morning sounds, the creak of floorboards, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock marking off seconds with mechanical precision. I made coffee and stood at the window, looking out at the street as it slowly came to life. A neighbor walked their dog past our house, the leash slack between them. A delivery truck rumbled by, stopping 3 houses down, the world proceeding normally, indifferent to the personal reckoning scheduled for this evening. Kara found me there 20 minutes later, her hair still mussed from sleep, wearing the robe I had given her for Christmas 3 years ago. She poured herself coffee without speaking and came to stand beside me, our shoulders touching in comfortable silence. We watched the street together, 2 people who had learned over 20 years of marriage that sometimes presence matters more than conversation. "Today's the day," she said finally, her voice still rough with sleep. "Yes. How do you feel?" I considered the question carefully, wanting honesty rather than reassurance. "Calm. Ready. Like I've done everything I needed to do, and now I'm just waiting for everyone else to catch up." She nodded slowly, sipping her coffee. I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios in my head, trying to imagine how it will go. "Don't," I said gently. "You'll drive yourself crazy trying to predict his reactions. Just be there. Be yourself. Let me handle the rest." "That's hard for me. Being passive." "You're not being passive. You're being protected. There's a difference." She leaned her head against my shoulder, and we stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other the way we always had during difficult times. The way we should have been doing for months instead of enduring Reed's behavior in isolated silence. We spent the morning doing deliberately normal things, as if by maintaining our routines we could anchor ourselves against whatever the evening would bring. I did some work in my office, responding to emails and reviewing a project proposal that didn't require immediate attention, but gave me something to focus on. Kara worked in the garden again, the physical labor of weeding and pruning providing its own form of meditation. Lunch was quiet, but not uncomfortable. We made sandwiches and ate at the kitchen table, talking about inconsequential things. The weather forecast for next week. Plans for Thanksgiving still a month away. Anything except the dinner that loomed larger with each passing hour. By mid-afternoon, we started getting ready with more care than usual. I showered and dressed in clothes that struck the right balance, neat and put together without looking like I was trying too hard. A button-down shirt in deep blue, dark slacks, shoes that were polished but not ostentatiously new. The kind of outfit that said I had made an effort without overthinking it. Kara chose a dress in charcoal gray, elegant and understated, with a simple silver necklace I had given her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She looked beautiful, poised, exactly like the woman Reed should have been proud to call his mother instead of the target he had chosen to diminish. As we moved around the bedroom getting ready, I caught her looking at herself in the mirror with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not vanity, not nervousness, something else. Something like determination or resolution. "What are you thinking?" I asked, adjusting my collar. She turned to face me, her hands smoothing the dress over her hips in an unconscious gesture. "I'm thinking that I'm tired of feeling small, tired of second-guessing myself every time we're around him. Tonight, I'm going to sit at that table and remember who I am, not who Reed and Brenna have been trying to make me feel like." "Good," I said, meaning it completely. "That's exactly right. You have nothing to apologize for, nothing to be ashamed of." She stepped closer and straightened my collar, her fingers gentle and familiar. "Thank you for doing this, for standing up for me." "Always," I said simply. At 5:30, we got in the car and began the drive to the restaurant. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, my breathing measured and controlled, my mind clear of everything except the sequence of events about to unfold. This was it, the moment all the preparation had been building toward. Kara sat beside me in the passenger seat, her purse in her lap, her fingers occasionally tapping against the leather in a rhythm that betrayed her nervous energy despite her earlier resolve. "What are you going to say when he asks?" she said, after we had been driving for a few minutes. "When he asks what?" "About the letter, the notice, what you did." "I'm going to tell him the truth. Simply and directly. No emotion, no justification beyond the facts. He signed agreements, he violated terms, I'm enforcing consequences. That's all." "You make it sound so clinical." "It is clinical. That's the point. This isn't about feelings or hurt pride or family drama. It's about systems and structures and agreements he made but didn't respect." She was quiet for a moment, processing that. Then she said, "What if he apologizes? What if he breaks down and says he's sorry?" "Then he apologizes, but the consequences stay the same. Because an apology under pressure isn't the same as understanding what you did wrong. And even if he understands, he still needs to learn that actions matter." "You're not going to give him a way out?" I glanced at her briefly before returning my eyes to the road. "The way out is forward, through the consequences, not around them." She nodded, seeming to accept that, and we drove the rest of the way in silence. We pulled into the parking lot a few minutes before 6. The same lot, the same entrance, the same autumn evening light casting long shadows across the pavement. I parked in a spot near the door, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment with my hand still on the wheel. "Ready?" I asked. Kara took a deep breath, then nodded. "Ready." We got out and walked toward the entrance together. I held the door for her, and we stepped inside. The same hostess stood at the podium with a polite smile. Marisol, the manager, stood near the front speaking with a server. She saw us and gave a small professional nod of recognition, her expression neutral but knowing. The hostess led us through the main dining area toward the private section in the back. I could hear voices before we arrived, familiar tones layered with forced cheerfulness. The performance was already beginning. We entered the private dining area, and the conversation stuttered briefly. Reed and Brenna were already seated at the far end of the long table. Reed looked tense, his jaw tight, his phone face up on the table in front of him like a security blanket. Brenna scrolled through hers, her expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Other family members filled the remaining spaces. Trevor, Reed's co-worker, talking too loudly about something automotive. Brenna's sister with her phone already angled for potential content. My mother Nola, sitting near the middle with her hands folded in her lap, watching everything with sharp, knowing eyes that missed nothing. "Hey, Mom, Dad," Reed said as we approached. His voice was polite, but the warmth had drained out of it completely. "Reed, Brenna," I said evenly. I pulled out Kara's chair for her, waited until she was seated, then took my own place directly across from Reed. The waiter appeared almost immediately, took drink orders with practiced efficiency, then disappeared back toward the kitchen. The table settled into uncomfortable small talk. Trevor launched into another story about his car's new modifications. Brenna's sister showed off pictures from some weekend event, angling her phone to make sure everyone could see. Nola asked Kara about her garden, a genuine question that cut through the artificial chatter like a lifeline. I placed my phone face up on the table in front of me and folded my hands. I didn't check it, didn't fidget with it. Just let it sit there, a quiet signal that I wasn't the one waiting for important messages tonight. Reed kept glancing at his phone. Every few minutes, he would pick it up, check the screen, then set it back down with slightly more force than necessary. His fingers drummed against the table in an irregular rhythm, betraying the calm facade he was trying to project. Appetizers arrived. People ate, made comments about the food, laughed at jokes that weren't quite funny enough to warrant the volume of the laughter. The energy in the room felt fragile, stretched thin, like everyone knew something was building but no one wanted to be the first to acknowledge it. And then Reed's phone buzzed. Not a gentle vibration, but an insistent one that made it skitter slightly across the tablecloth. He grabbed it immediately, his fingers moving fast across the screen. His eyes scanned whatever was displayed there, and I watched his face shift. The confident mask slipped, just for a moment, replaced by something tighter. Confusion, maybe. Or the first flicker of real concern. He set the phone down slowly, deliberately, and looked across the table directly at me. "So," he said, his voice casual but edged with tension underneath. "You want to explain what this is about?" I met his gaze, calm and steady. "Not yet." His jaw tightened. "Not yet?" "No." Brenna leaned forward, her voice sharp with frustration. "If you have something to say, just say it." I turned to her, still perfectly calm. "I will. When it's time." Nola cut in, her voice firm and brooking no argument. "Let him speak when he's ready, Brenna." Brenna leaned back, clearly frustrated but unwilling to challenge Nola directly. Reed glanced at his grandmother, then at me, then back down at his phone. The table fell quiet, all the forced conversation fading as everyone sensed the change in the air. I didn't fill the silence, didn't explain or justify or hurry things along. I just waited, hands still folded, expression neutral, while Reed's confidence continued to crack around the edges, and the weight of what was coming settled over the table like gathering storm clouds. The waiter appeared with the entrees, set them down efficiently, and retreated. No one reached for their food immediately. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see what would happen next. The entrees arrived. For a few minutes, forks scraped plates, the tension thick enough to cut. Reed set his utensils down hard. "You know what, Dad? We need to talk about this right now." I set my fork down slowly. "All right." "You sent me a legal letter? About what? Some old agreements you never told me were real?" "They were always real. You just never had reason to worry about them before." "Because they didn't exist." "No. Because you were respectful. When you're respectful, there's no need to enforce boundaries." Brenna laughed, sharp and bitter. "Boundaries? This is your son." "That's exactly why I'm talking about boundaries, because I raised him better than this." Reed's face flushed. "Better than what?" "Better than mocking your mother in public. Better than treating her like she's beneath you. Better than letting your wife clap like it's a performance." Complete silence. "That was a joke," Reed said weakly. "No, it wasn't. You're overreacting." "I'm reacting exactly as much as I need to." Nola cleared her throat. "Reed, maybe you should listen." "Stay out of this, Grandma." Her eyes went cold. "Don't speak to me that way." Reed looked around for support. No one met his gaze. Trevor stared at his plate. Even Brenna had gone quiet. "You're jealous," Reed said, voice rising. "Jealous that I'm doing well." "You don't need me, but you relied on me. There's a difference." "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded paper, set it on the table between us. "What is that?" Brenna asked. "A copy of the formal notice I sent after the last dinner. The one where you clapped, Brenna. The one where Reed told Kara to know her place." Reed grabbed it, hands shaking. His eyes scanned the text. Color drained from his face. "This is about the apartment. Not just the apartment. The lease I co-signed. The one I guaranteed. The one that allows you to live where you live." Brenna leaned over. "You co-signed his lease?" 3 years ago, and as co-signer I have certain rights, including the right to withdraw my guarantee if terms are violated." "What terms?" Reed demanded. "You never said anything." "The terms were simple. Treat your family with respect." "This is insane. You can't pull your support because I made a joke." "I'm not pulling support because you made a joke. I'm enforcing a boundary because you spent months treating your mother like she's less than you." Brenna stood. "This is manipulation." "No, I'm showing him actions have consequences, through legal channels, through systems he understands." "You can't do this," Reed said desperately. "If you pull the cosign, the lease defaults. I'll lose the apartment. My credit. You'll figure it out. The way most people do. without using someone else's stability while you disrespect them. He gripped the table. So you're just going to ruin my life because your feelings got hurt? My feelings didn't get hurt. Your mother's did, and I'm done pretending that's acceptable. Kara took my hand, steady and strong. Nola spoke quietly. Reed, your father is doing what he should have done months ago. Reed stared at the paper, then at me, his confidence completely gone, replaced by dawning comprehension of what he'd lost. I stood, helped Kara to her feet. 30 days, I said. Use them wisely. Reed's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Around the table, shocked silence. Brenna's face pale, Trevor frozen. Even the waiter had stopped approaching. I looked at Reed one last time. His hands trembled over the paper, his phone dark on the table beside it. His carefully constructed confidence shattered into pieces he wouldn't be able to reassemble with charm or excuses. Kara and I walked out together. Behind us, I heard nothing. No protests, no arguments, no sound at all except our footsteps on the restaurant floor. We passed Marisol near the front. She gave a small, knowing nod. In the car, Kara let out a long breath and squeezed my hand. I started the engine and we drove away, leaving Reed sitting at that table with the notice in his hands and the weight of consequences finally, irreversibly, his to carry.